JanBask training. Learn and grow.
So these are dynamic testing techniques. First one is specification based technique. Then we have equivalence partitioning. Then we have boundary value analysis, state transition, and decision table. So we'll try to cover equivalence partitioning or boundary value. Let's see how much we can cover today. So this is a flow that will really help you in understanding how there are different types of testing in the IT testing world and how many different techniques are there, okay, for different types of testing, right? So first, at the higher level, we have static and dynamic. Then in static, what do we have? On the left side, we have informal reviews, walkthroughs, technical reviews, and inspection. These are all document related things. This thing I'm talking about, this left part. Okay, these are all document related thing. Then go to the right side of a static testing. What do we have? We have static analysis, data flow, and control flow. In this part, we have to go inside the code and check the code using different static testing techniques. Okay, we can also use different tools, different code verification tools, right? So those things can be done here in right side. Then at the same level of static testing, we have dynamic testing, in which we have structure based technique, experience based technique, and specification based technique. Structure based technique, again, we have to do statement coverage, decision coverage, conditioning, multiple condition verification. So again, we go to the code, right? We do different, we use different loops, if else condition, we put different data on it, right? Run the conditions, and then we verify whether code is giving the correct output or not. Okay. Now in static analysis, data flow, control flow, and this statement decision and structure based testing, what is the difference between the two? Are you able to understand? I mean, in static analysis, data flow and control flow, what do? We use different tools to tell whether our code is compiling correctly or not. If there is any error, it will let me know, right? I mean, then there itself. So those kind of thing we can do in static, and we can use different tools to analyze our code. We can check the performance of the code and all those things. In structure based technique, in statement coverage, decision coverage, we basically check the coverage of the code, whether our code is able to cover each and everything from the requirement or not, right? Those things are done in structure based techniques. Now experience based technique is nothing but the testing based on your experience. So if you have tested an e-learning portal, in your career, then if you get the same kind of site again to test, it will be easy for you to test it, right? Because you have already tested that thing in your previous project or any time in your career. So if you get the e-learning portal or e-learning application again in your career, it will be easy for you to test because you are well versed with each and every area of an e-learning portal. You know that, okay, this particular part can have more issues, this particular part can have more defects, right? What are different terms that are used in e-learning portal? So all those things you will be aware of. That is why it will be easy for you to test. So experience based basically uh, is the technique in which you use your past experiences, and it is again divided into two parts: error guessing and exploratory. So exploratory, I have already told you that based on your experience, what you do, you explore the application, you try to learn the new application, and you try to find the defect at the same time. Error guessing is, as I told you, that you'll be aware of each and every module of the application, so it will be easy for you to guess that this particular part of the application will be having more defect. Okay, that is experience based technique. Okay, now in specification based technique, what do? This is used for writing your test cases. For your you can write your test cases based on these techniques, using these techniques basically. So we'll see these in detail. Let's skip them as of now, okay, and move to next slide. Okay, so this is again test design techniques that I explained you. Let's go through the slide once. There are many different types of software testing techniques, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. Each individual technique is good at finding particular types of defect and relatively poor at finding other types. So this point particularly saying that each of the technique is, it has its own strengths and weaknesses. So each individual technique is good in finding a particular type of defect. Each testing technique falls into one of a number of different categories. Broadly, there are two main categories, static and dynamic. Static techniques were discussed in previous session. So we have already seen static techniques in the previous session, right? Now we have to come to the dynamic. Dynamic techniques are divided into three more categories: specification based, black box, that is black box, also known as behavioral techniques, structure based, that is white box or the structure techniques, and experience based. These three. Okay, so we have to see these now. So in black box testing techniques, what we do, the first of the dynamic testing technique we will look at are the specification based techniques. These are also known as black box or input output driven testing techniques. These are the technique in which we just give some input and get the output. Okay, that is why we call it as a black box testing techniques. Uh, because they view the software as a black box with input and output, but they have no knowledge of how the system component is structured inside the box. Yes, we have already seen this thing. These are useful, appropriate at all levels of testing, component testing through to acceptance testing, where a specification exists. Okay, so wherever you find a specification, you find a guideline, you find a requirement, right? There you can implement this black box testing techniques, be it at unit level or the acceptance level. When performing system or acceptance testing, the requirement specification or functional specification may vary from may form the basis of test. Okay, when you are performing the system or acceptance testing, right, the requirement documents that you are getting or the functional documents that you are getting from the BA, right, those documents will be the basis of your test cases. I will explain you in the coming classes how do we write the test cases and how these techniques will be used there. Okay, so don't worry about this theory part as of now. Structure based, the white box testing. These techniques use the internal structure of the software to derive test cases. So when you have to write test cases of white box testing, then you use structure based testing techniques. They are commonly called as white box techniques, implying you can see into the system. Since they require knowledge of how the software is implemented, that is how it works. So for implementing this white box testing technique, what do you know? What you should be knowing? You should be knowing the code. You should be having an idea about the coding, right? How code is written, how system is working, all those things. Developers use structure-based testing techniques in component testing and component integration testing, especially where there is a good tool support for code coverage. So developers generally, they are asked to write unit test cases, and they should use all these techniques, but they generally don't do it. That is why we have to do. So experience-based technique says, in experience-based technique, people's knowledge, skills, and background are a prime contributor to the test condition and test cases. The same thing I told you, right? What you have done in previous projects, what are your skills, right? What kind of application you have tested. Actually, those things matter a lot in experience-based techniques because your experience only counted in this particular type of testing. The experience of both technical and business people is important as they bring different perspective to the test analysis and design process. So if you have both technical and business point of view, you if you are good with the flow of business application, and at the same time you are good in technical aspect of it, then it will be very very good to write different kind of test cases, because when you're writing the test cases, both the perspective are very very important. From the business flow also you should see everything, and from the technical point of view also you should cover each and everything during testing. Due to previous experience with similar systems, they may have insights into what could go wrong, which is very useful for testing. Right? This is what I explained to you. These techniques are used to complement specification and structure-based techniques, and are also used when there is no specification, or if the specification is inadequate or out of date. So experience-based techniques are basically, supporting techniques to these two. Okay. When you are done with the test cases writing of these two, let's say, right, and you want to do some extra kind of testing, still you do not have confidence of the application and you still want to test, then what you do experience based technique, in which you explore the application. You, based on your knowledge, based on your previous experience, you try to explore the testing. So apart from these two, this experience based technique is done as an extra effort, and this gives you more and more defects. You can get more defects in experience based. You can also get the defects which are not found in these two. Okay, this is also important. Experience based is also important when you do not have any specification document with you. Suppose you did not get any requirement specification, or any other document from the client, then in that case, based on your previous experience, you will be testing the application. Any questions till now?
No.
Okay, so now we start with specification based techniques. There are 4 specification based techniques we will cover in detail. Which are these 4 techniques? First one is equivalence partitioning, boundary value analysis, decision table, and state transition testing. Okay, now let's see one of them one by one. Equivalence partitioning is a good all-round specification-based black box technique. It can be applied at any level of testing and is often a good technique to use first. Okay, so we will go by these PPT details, but first of all, let me explain what actually it is, so that you are able to understand the things which are written here, and you are able to understand what actually equivalence class partitioning is. Okay, then only that document, that PPT will make sense when you understand it. Okay, so let me share the paint. Okay, can you see it?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, let me say you have, okay, this is a web page. In this page you have a username field and a password field. Okay, or let's take it this way. You have this address page here, wherein you have to add different address where you want your shipment to be delivered, right? Here you have country drop down. Okay, and here you have another drop down, let's say pin code, right? Area pin code. Okay, so you know that in country drop down there will be n number of countries, right? Every little, small, big, any country will be there in this drop down, and it will be a huge drop down. and this pin code will be a text field. It can accept any digit, right? Any digit, any positive digit. Now, if you have to test it, this country dropdown, how will you test it? What will be your approach for testing this country dropdown or this particular page? Alina?
Mm, the field with country, we can put any country, or
Mhm.
if it will be positive testing. But if we try make negative testing, we put any incorrect digits and any words.
So how will you, I mean, in country dropdown, there are, let's say, 500 countries, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's take an example that there are 500 countries in this dropdown. So how will you test it? I mean, will you go and check for each and every country? You will select each and every country from this dropdown and then click on submit.
Oh no, it's very a lot country. If we try to test every,
So what will be your approach? Anyone else?
maybe 5 or 10 country try to test.
Okay, 10 countries. Okay, anybody else? Joanna, Morgan?
You can put a random country there.
Hmm.
Maybe just a random country that is not included in the drop down
Okay.
page.
And what will you do for the rest of the countries? Will you not verify it?
Of course you will verify it, but like you said, I think this is the testing or negative. Okay, sorry right
Okay,
now.
no problem. Let me tell you. So what will you do? Suppose you have a list of 500 countries. Okay, in this drop down. Okay, sorry. There are 500 countries in the drop down. Okay, and for this area pin code, it can accept any 6-digit number. Okay, this particular thing has 500 countries in the drop down, and this is a text box which can accept any 6-digit number. Now for this country drop down, what will you do? You will have to create. Okay, let's not create anything as of now. Let's see your approach. So out of this 500 countries, if I test each and every country, it will be 500 times I'll be going to this page, selecting the country, clicking on submit, right? Is that a good approach? No, not at all. So what you consider is, you will consider that out of these 500 countries listed here, if we see the application should work with any of these countries, right? And since it is not feasible to test all of 500 countries, what you do, you basically take the positive, one of the positive uh, input, which is, let's say, so what you do is you divide your input into this. So 500 is the list that you have got. So 1 to 500 will be your positive input. Okay, anything from 1 till 500 will be your positive input. Okay, and because this is a drop down, so it will be 1 to 500. 0 is not an option here. Okay, you have to select either 1 or the 500th country. Now if we do not go for if we see the negative testing of it, negative values of it, what will be those things? It will be 0 or less than 0. It will be less than 0, basically less than or equal to 0. uh, it will be less than or equal to 0. Fine. And then there will be any other value than the country name or any invalid country name. Okay, so this is the way you can divide your input, right? What you can do is you can make 3 different partitions like this, in which you can divide it. So first one is your negative partition, then this is your positive, and again this is a negative. Okay, so what equivalence class says that anything from the positive class that you have divided from the positive partition, if you pick any of the value, you should be expecting the same behavior. Even if you select the first country or the 5th 100th, the behavior of the application should be same, because these are in the positive values, positive range, right? Anything from the negative range, if you select, let's say this is not a drop down and it's a text field, so you would be entering values, right? But so in that case, if it's a text box, anything less than or equal to 0 means if you're not putting any country or you're giving any special character or something like that, that will be, or any digit if you put, that will be considered as a negative testing, a negative value, right? So if you take any of those values, it should work like that only. It should give you an error. And same goes with the negative country name. If you are putting any country name which is not there in the list, does not exist, right? Then that should also give you an error. Okay. So this is the way we divide it. Now this was a drop down, right? So it was a 500 value drop down, and you were not able to since that's a positive input, that's a positive value. So what you will do in this case? In this case, these values will not be applicable. These things will not be applicable, but just this part will be applicable. Okay, 1 to 500 positive input. Now there are 1 to 500 positive input. You can take any one of the input, right? And you can test the application for it. If you are not satisfied with that particular thing, then what you can do, you can pull out not just one value, but 2 to 3 values from the positive inputs, right? You can check this page for 2 to 3 values at least, right? And then you can say that this particular application is working, or this particular drop down is working fine, because it is not possible to test each and every value out of this 500 values. Clear? Make sense? Now let's understand this particular second part. Now what it says that there is a pin code text box, right, which accepts any 6-digit number. Okay, now again let's make a partition, any 6-digit number. Okay, so this and this. Now what will be the positive flow? Any 6 digits. Okay, there is no range given, but the range is in terms of number, I mean the positions or the count. So you have 6 digits. There is no range from there is nothing like it will be starting from this number to this. It's not like that. It should be any 6-digit number. So what will be your negative scenario in this case? Any 5-digit number or less. Okay, and then there could be any 7-digit number or more. Okay, this could be one of the scenario. What else could be there? Any other negative scenario? Anyone? Okay, just a minute.
Like if you put in 6 digits, like all 6 0 0 0 0, right? Then it will give the negative.
Uh, Again, if it is allowed by the system, then it will not be a negative because it says any 6 digit. It has not given you any range. Okay,
Okay.
any 6 digit. I mean, 00 is also a 6-digit number, right?
Mhm.
So that will not be a negative value. What could be the negative value? It could be anything except a number, right? Anything except a number. Since this particular field accepts a number, a digit, so if you're entering anything except a number, that should be a negative test case. That should give you an error, right? Clear or not?
It's clear.
Clear? So now these are your equivalence classes. Now why equivalence classes? Because equivalence class says that all the classes, all the partition are treated as equal. All the partition that we make in equivalence class are treated as equal, and all the numbers, all the values that are falling inside that particular that particular partition are equal. For example, if I say that this any 5-digit number or less, so any 5-digit number in this particular partition will be treated as equal. Okay, so if you take any random 5-digit number or less than 5-digit number, it should throw you an error, right? So when you will write your test cases, you will just take one number from this particular partition, any random number, 5-digit number, for checking the error message. Okay, now second test case will be of any 6-digit number. This will be a positive test case, that it should get me to the next page. It should give me a success message. Again, any 7-digit random number or any more than 7-digit random number will be treated as equal, right? So you can take any random number of 7-digit or more, and that should give you an error because all the inputs, all the values inside this partition are treated as equal. Similarly, anything except number will give an error. If you're putting any alphabet, any character here in this particular pin code field, so that should give you an error. Clear? This way we have to write our this way we can create our this equivalence classes, and then we can verify the, or we can write the test cases for any application. Okay, any questions in this? Anyone?
Yes, this field, anything except a number. If does it include, for example, if you want to try test an empty field, is the same anything except number?
If you want to try what? If you try
Empty field.
empty field.
Yes.
Okay, if you are not entering anything,
Yeah.
so it will be, again, it will be anything except the number, right? Because you are entering blank.
Okay.
Okay. Now let's take one more example. And in this, there is this field which accepts a number from 1 to 100. Okay. This field accepts from 1 to 100 number. Now this is not related to the count, but this is related to the range. The range is given from 1 to 100. This field accepts 1 to 100. Now what will be the equivalence class for this? Equivalence classes for this? The positive flow will be?
Positive, it will be 1. uh, for example, 20 and 100.
Okay, let me create a new. Okay, this is the range that we are following. Let me create the partition. So positive will be 1 to 100, right? Anything between 1 and 100. So
Yes,
let's say we take, for example, we take 45. That should work, right? And what will be the negative?
Any
But
number less than 1.
Less than 1, correct. So less than 1.
it can be negative or don't, or with point, for example, 0.5 or -3.
Yep. Anything. It could be -3, it could be -5, it could be -6, anything, right? But it should be less than 1, right? So for example, we take -3, let's say, right? That should be negative value, right? But that should be a valid value for the negative test case. And again, another boundary, another equivalence class will be
More than 100.
more than 100, correct? So if we take, for example, for 300, that should also work, because anything that falls in this particular partition, any value from this partition will be working, should be working, for the positive flow. Anything from this partition, the less than 1 partition, should be working for negative flow, and same thing goes for the more than 100 partition. Any value if you pick other than 100, more than 100, that should be working for the negative test case. Clear? Any questions, anyone?
Yes. Do we have to test a digit on a border? I mean that not only 45 and 1 and 100 and also 45. Or just enough one digit in our positive.
See, ideally it says that one input from any of these partitions will be sufficient. Ideally it should be the case, right?
Okay.
If you pick any one value from all the partitions, that should be working fine. That should be sufficient for testing, right? Be it a positive test case or a negative test case, that particular value should be sufficient. But it actually doesn't happen in the real world scenarios. When you are actually testing, you just can't rely on just one digit from the positive partition, right? If there are 1 to 100, if the range is 1 to 100, so you cannot just pick one number and you can test your application. You cannot just rely on that. So what you will do in real world, you will do exploratory testing out of this. So I told you that exploratory is a complementary testing to dynamic testing techniques, right? So when you have using dynamic testing techniques, when you have written your test cases, ideally you took one value for the positive and one for the negative, another one again for the two for the negative test case and one for positive, right? When this is done, then what will you do? You will do complementary testing, which is exploratory, which is in addition to the dynamic testing techniques. So in exploratory, what will you do? You will select at least 3 or 4 values out of this 1 to 100 range, and you will test that the application should be working fine, right? Same thing for negative testing also. You will write different values, you will enter different negative values, and you will see that you should be getting an error. Okay?
Okay, but behind a digit, we also have to test in any except number, empty field, letter, any
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
But that will be your thought process for creating the test cases, right? That will be thought process for creating the test case. This will not be considered as a partition. Basically, a range. When you have a range of something to test, then only you can use this equivalence class, basically.
Okay.
Wherever there is a range given to you, right, then only you should use this equivalence class and boundary value analysis. Boundary value we will see in the coming classes. Okay, so these are mostly specific to the range testing when you have given a range for something. If you want to use it for other kind of fields, then also you can create the partition like this, the way I have created here. Any 5-digit number or anything except a number, then again you can create one more partition and you can say any null values or something like that, right? Those things can always be done. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
But the partition says that the basis of equivalence class partitioning is that you should pick only one value from each partition, and that should be sufficient to test the application. Clear? Okay, so now we have to again move to the slide. Let me share it again. Okay, now you understand. Now if you read these things, you'll be able to understand. So let's move to the second point, which says the idea behind the technique is to divide, that is to partition, a set of test conditions into groups or sets that can be considered the same. Right? That is, the system should handle them equivalently. Hence, equivalence partitioning. Equivalence partitions are also known as equivalence classes. I think that is self-sufficient, self-explanatory now. We have already seen this thing. In case you have any question, just let me know. I'll explain it. Anybody? Any question? Okay. In third point, it says in equivalence class partitioning technique, we need to test only one condition from each partition. Right? This is because we are assuming that all the conditions in one partition will be treated in the same way by the software. I hope this is clear. If one condition in a partition works, we assume all of the condition in that partition will be working. And so there is a little point in testing of any of these others. It doesn't make sense that if you have given a range of 1 to 100, it doesn't make sense that you test from first to 100 all the values for that particular field, right? So what you do, you treat all the inputs from 1 to 100 as equivalent. They are considered to be equivalent, and you pick any of the values from 1 to 100 and you check the software. It should treat, all the values from 1 to 100, it should treat equivalent. Equivalence partitioning is a testing technique where input values set into classes for testing. Valid input class keeps all valid input, and invalid input class keeps all invalid input. Okay, I hope this PPT makes sense now and you are able to understand it. Any questions, anyone, or we should move?
Any question? Clear.
No? Okay. So now there is an example given. A text field permits only numeric characters. Length must be 6 characters long. Okay. So I have already told this to you. This example is already taken. Okay. Now what will be, now let's see again, once again. Partition according to the requirement should be like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, invalid. Okay. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 should be invalid because it says the number must be between 6 and 10. Okay. Number must be between 6 and 10. So any number which is which is less than 6 should be invalid. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is invalid. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is valid. 11 to 14 or anything above 14 is invalid. Clear? Any question?
No, it's clear.
Okay. While equivalence class partitioning, values in all the partition are equivalent. That is why 0 to 5 are equivalent, 6 to 10 are equivalent, and 11 to 14 are equivalent. At the time of testing, test 4 and test 12 as invalid values and 7 as valid one. So it is just saying that at the time of testing, just take any one value from the any of the partition. Let's take 4 from the invalid class, 12 from the valid class, 12 from again invalid class, and 7 from the valid class, and it should work. It is easy to test input ranges 6 to 10, but harder to test input ranges 2 to 600. Testing will be easy in case of lesser test cases, but you should be very careful. Assuming valid input is 7, that means you believe that developer coded the correct valid range between 6 to 10. So I already told you that if there is a range of very long values, if there is, let's say, a range given to you 1 to 100, so it will not be easy for you to test all the values from 1 to 100. At the same time, if you pick any one value from that range, you will not be confident, right? You will not be confident on the application, because picking any one value from 100 values does not make sense. Actually, it does not give you confidence on the application. Although your software should be treating as equal, right? For all the values, it should give you the success message. But you just can't rely on the developers. Developer can also make a mistake. That is why I told you that you should do the exploratory testing in simultaneously. I mean, along with this equivalence class or any other dynamic testing. Okay. Or what you can do is, you cannot just rely on one value. You can take 2 to 3 values and test it for your application, so that it gives you some confidence that all the values are working actually. Clear? Now, okay, now there's boundary value analysis. So we will see this tomorrow, and rest of the testing techniques we will see tomorrow. Okay. For today, it will just be till equivalence class. Okay.
Okay.
Any questions? If you have any questions, just let me know. If you want to send it through email, if you want to ask any question tomorrow, you can do it.
Okay.
Okay. Don't just hesitate to ask questions. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, guys. Have a nice day then. Bye bye.
Bye.
JanBask training. Learn and grow.